Conor McGregor just received a pair of boxing gloves from the Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden. Not as a promotional stunt. Not as a staged photo opportunity. As a genuine gesture of brotherhood between two men who, in the eyes of the man who handed them over, share the same fundamental experience. The experience of walking into a situation where everything can go wrong, where your body can fail you, where the outcome is never guaranteed, and choosing to go anyway. That is the version of Conor McGregor that is preparing for Max Holloway at International Fight Week. And the question that nobody can answer from the outside, the question that Ilia Topuria himself raised when he said you never know what is really happening behind the scenes, that a man can train in the morning and party at night, is whether the version showing up on social media is the whole truth or a carefully constructed portion of it. Let's start with what McGregor actually said about his preparation, because it is more substantive than the clip suggests and it reveals something real about how his thinking has evolved. He built his early career on a specific philosophy, obsessive visualization of the perfect scenario. He told every opponent exactly what he was going to do, how he was going to do it, and when. And 99% of the time, by his own accounting, it happened. The 1% that didn't, the Diaz fight, the Khabib fight, the second Poirier fight, produced the kind of losses that forced a reckoning with that philosophy. And the reckoning produced a different approach. He now works backwards from the worst-case scenario. If the ankle goes, what is the response? If the shoulder fails, what is the answer? If the momentum shifts completely and the perfect scenario disappears entirely, what does he do then? This is not the McGregor of 2015 or 2016 talking. This is a man who had a leg break inside the Octagon, who spent years rebuilding a body that genuinely failed him in the worst possible moment, and who has arrived at a more complete philosophy of preparation as a result. Whether that philosophy translates into performance is the only question that matters. But the evolution it represents is real. Michael Bisping, a former world champion, a man who knows what elite preparation looks like from the inside, raised the concern that deserves the most serious engagement. 5 years. The sport has progressed in 5 years in ways that are not marginal. The calf kick revolution that fundamentally changed how striking exchanges are managed at the highest level, already emerging before McGregor's last fight but now completely embedded in how elite fighters operate, is one example. The wrestling talent coming into the sport from the mountain regions of Central Asia, from the Chechen tradition, from the pipeline that produced Khabib and Chimaev and an entire generation of fighters who combine elite grappling with genuine striking ability, that is another. McGregor's counterpunching system was built in a specific era, against a specific generation of opponents, with a specific set of assumptions about how fights unfold at the highest level. The sport he is returning to in 2026 is not the sport he left in 2021. And 2021 was already the sport that had passed him in certain respects. Bisping also made the legacy point that the fight's advocates do not want to acknowledge, but that is sitting in the room regardless. If McGregor loses this fight badly, if he gets steamrolled, if he looks like a man who cannot compete at this level anymore, the casual fans and the new audience will rewrite the memory. They will look at the name and think of the losses rather than the moments that built the legend. The Eddie Alvarez performance. The 13-second knockout of Jose Aldo. The double championship night where he stood in the cage with 2 belts and apologized to absolutely nobody. Those moments are real and they are permanent, and no loss erases them for anyone who is actually watching. But for the portion of the audience that arrives at the fight without that context, and at International Fight Week, that portion is significant. A dominant defeat becomes the defining image. Bisping's point is not that McGregor's legacy is fragile. His point is that this specific fight carries asymmetric legacy risk in a way that most comeback fights do not. The weight class dimension is one of the most under-examined elements of this entire matchup. This fight is at 170 pounds. That is not Holloway's weight class. It is not a division where either man is the established competitor. Both of them are walking into a catch-weight arrangement where the normal advantages of optimal competition weight are theoretically neutralized. But the physical reality is that McGregor, a man whose natural size and frame have always been closer to welterweight than featherweight, potentially benefits more from this arrangement than Holloway does. The power that lands at 170 pounds carries different consequences than the power that lands at 155. Holloway has been dropped before. He has been hurt before. He has shown, across his recent fights, that the durability that defined his middle career has been tested in ways it was not earlier. Dustin Poirier dropped him. Topuria hurt him. He has touched the canvas more in the last 3 fights of his career than in the entirety of everything before. If McGregor's left hand, arriving with the benefit of a full weight class, catches Holloway in the first 2 rounds before the conditioning gap becomes the story, that is a genuine path to victory that the odds do not fully account for. Topuria's read on McGregor is worth taking seriously precisely because he has no promotional incentive to be generous. He watched the training footage. He said McGregor looks locked in. He said the sessions look like genuine preparation. And then he added the caveat that captures everything uncertain about this situation. You never know what is happening behind the scenes from what you see on social media. He could be training in the morning and doing something entirely different at night. That is not an accusation. It is an acknowledgement that McGregor's public image has always been a construction, that the line between the real preparation and the performance of preparation has never been fully visible from outside the camp, and that the only moment when the truth becomes unavoidable is when the octagon door closes and the bell rings. Mauricio Ruffy offered an interesting technical observation that cuts to the structural weakness in McGregor's game when the early finish does not arrive. He acknowledged McGregor's impact on the sport, credited the explosive, finish-oriented style that changed how the world understood MMA striking. And then he drew the distinction. McGregor's game has always been built around the early knockout. His power, his timing, his psychological dominance in the opening minutes, these are real and they are elite. But when that finish does not come, when the fight extends past the first 2 rounds into territory where conditioning and sustained output determine outcomes, McGregor has historically not been the man with the answers. Against Diaz the second time, he had answers in round 3. Against Khabib, he did not have them in round 2 or 3 or 4. Against Poirier the second time, his gas tank told a different story than his pre-fight confidence had suggested. The pattern is real, and it is the pattern that Holloway, one of the most active, most consistently prepared, highest output fighters in the sport's recent history, is specifically designed to exploit. Charles Oliveira's perspective was the most gracious and in some ways the most honest. He stepped back from the fight analysis entirely and acknowledged what McGregor's contribution to MMA actually was. The man who took the sport mainstream, who made casual sports fans care, who built an audience that the UFC is still monetizing years after his last competitive performance. That contribution does not expire. It is not conditional on what happens at International Fight Week. Whatever the result on July 11th, the Jose Aldo 13 seconds happened. The Eddie Alvarez masterclass happened. The Floyd Mayweather crossing happened. The cultural moment of watching someone from Crumlin, Dublin, become the most recognizable combat sports figure on the planet, that happened. Oliveira's point is that the legacy is already built. The fight is an addition to it, not a referendum on it. The path this fight takes is cleaner to project than the outcome. McGregor comes out sharp in the first round. He uses the space, manages the distance, establishes the jab, and looks for the left-hand counter when Holloway commits to his volume. If he lands clean in those first 5 minutes, and his timing, even after 5 years, carries a precision that does not disappear with inactivity the way conditioning does, the fight changes entirely. If Holloway survives the early danger, absorbs the power shots that are coming with 170 pounds of momentum behind them, and begins to impose the volume and pace that defines his style in the championship rounds, the fight moves in a direction that McGregor has historically struggled to manage. The cardio question is real. The ring rust question is real. The question of whether 5 years away from elite competition at this level has eroded the specific physical attributes, the explosion, the reflexes, the ability to maintain composure under sustained pressure, that made the early version of McGregor so devastating, that question does not get answered in the gym. It gets answered when the 5th round starts and both men are exhausted and someone has to find something extra. The pick is Holloway, because the activity gap is too large and the conditioning advantage too real to ignore across 5 rounds. But the caveat is the largest caveat in this sport. McGregor's left hand has never cared about activity gaps or conditioning math. It has only ever cared about timing. And Conor McGregor has never, in any fight, at any stage of his career, stopped believing that the timing is going to come. The Navy SEAL gave him gloves. He took them and said he will beat Max Holloway. He said it the way a man says something he has already decided is true. Whether the Octagon agrees is the only remaining question.